The tragic and unsettling murder of 2-year-old Sanam Navsarka sent shockwaves throughout the United Kingdom, leaving a community in grief and a nation questioning how such a young life could be so brutally taken. Born on Christmas Eve in 2005, Sanam was a little girl full of promise, living a life that any child would hope to enjoy, surrounded by family, love, and care. Yet, the circumstances leading to her untimely death would reveal a darker side of domestic life and highlight issues that resonate deeply with society: child protection, domestic abuse, and the failures that sometimes allow tragedy to unfold behind closed doors. Sanam Navsarka's life began on December 24, 2005, a day filled with festive joy and the hope that a child's birth often brings. Born into a family residing in Dayton, a suburb of Huddersfield, West Yorkshire, Sanam lived with her mother, Zabina Zaman, and later with Zabina's boyfriend, Subhan Anwar. Zabina, a young woman herself, faced the complexities of raising a child in an environment marked by instability and challenges. The arrival of Subhan Anwar, who had been with Zabina for just 3 months at the time of the tragedy, introduced a new dynamic into the household, one that would have profound and ultimately devastating consequences. Dayton is a diverse and vibrant community with a rich cultural tapestry, home to many families of different backgrounds. Like many working-class neighborhoods in the north of England, it struggles with socio-economic pressures, but it is also a place where community ties are strong and neighbors often look out for one another. However, the issue of domestic violence and child abuse is not confined by geography, culture, or class, and the events that led to Sanam's death revealed the hidden dangers lurking behind the walls of even seemingly ordinary households. Zabina's relationship with Subhan Anwar was relatively brief, having lasted only about 3 months before the tragic events unfolded. What is known from the investigation is that Subhan Anwar became a central figure in the household very quickly, and with him came a pattern of abusive behavior. The nature of this relationship, its beginnings, and the dynamics within the household are critical to understanding the circumstances surrounding Sanam's death. Reports suggest that the environment was tense and volatile, with Subhan displaying signs of aggression and control that would soon escalate to violence. On the day that would become etched in the memory of those who followed the case, the young toddler Sanam Navsarka suffered fatal injuries. The details of what happened inside the home remain chilling, a reminder of how vulnerable children are when exposed to domestic abuse and neglect. According to court proceedings and police investigations, the injuries inflicted upon Sanam were severe and consistent with prolonged abuse rather than a single incident. The extent of her suffering raised urgent questions about how long the abuse had been ongoing and whether there were missed opportunities for intervention. The investigation into the murder of 2-year-old Sanam Navsarka was one of the most harrowing in the history of West Yorkshire Police. From the moment emergency services were called to the home in Huddersfield in May 2008, it became clear that this was not a case of natural causes or a tragic accident. The circumstances surrounding Sanam's injuries were deeply suspicious, and as detectives began to unravel the events leading up to her death, they uncovered a deeply disturbing picture of sustained abuse, cruelty, and neglect. Emergency services were called on May 19, 2008, to the home of Zabina Zaman and Subhan Anwar in Dayton, Huddersfield. Sanam was found unresponsive and later declared dead at the hospital. Her body was covered in bruises, and there were clear signs of trauma. The initial report made by the adults in the household claimed that Sanam had fallen and become unwell, but medical staff and police officers were immediately suspicious. The paramedics who responded were disturbed by the child's condition. Sanam was emaciated, had multiple injuries in various stages of healing, and was clearly the victim of long-term abuse. Given the extensive injuries visible on her small body, the authorities quickly treated her death as suspicious, and a full murder investigation was launched. A post-mortem examination conducted by a forensic pathologist painted a horrifying picture of Sanam's final weeks. The findings were nothing short of heartbreaking. She had suffered 107 separate injuries, including fractures to all 4 limbs, some up to 2 weeks old, multiple rib fractures, severe internal bruising, cuts, burns, and bruises to her head, chest, back, and legs. Clear evidence of being struck, gripped, and twisted repeatedly. The injuries to her legs were particularly alarming. Her femurs had been broken with such force that experts compared the breaks to those seen in high-speed car crashes or major falls. Yet there was no record of any hospital visit or attempt by the adults in her life to seek medical attention. One of the most chilling aspects of the investigation was the discovery that Sanam had been confined in a cupboard during the final days of her life. Investigators found her fingerprints inside a cupboard at the house, suggesting she had been locked inside, alone and in pain. Timeline reconstruction and pattern of abuse. Police began the painstaking task of reconstructing the timeline of Sanam's final days and weeks. Neighbors and family members were interviewed, and phone records, texts, and internet searches from Zaman and Anwar were examined. A pattern of increasing isolation and abuse emerged. Investigators concluded that the abuse had begun shortly after Subhan Anwar moved in with Zabina Zaman. He quickly took control of the household and started punishing Sanam for minor infractions or for being naughty. What began as physical discipline spiraled into sustained and extreme abuse. Sanam was eventually removed from her bedroom and kept in a cupboard in a small storage area, hidden away when visitors arrived. Her cries were muffled or ignored. The last days of her life were marked by severe neglect, starvation, and untreated injuries. Evidence suggested she had been kept from walking to hide her leg injuries and was rarely fed or allowed outside. Following the autopsy, both Zabina Zaman and Subhan Anwar were arrested on suspicion of murder. During questioning, their stories were inconsistent. Initially, Zaman claimed that Sanam had fallen from a bed and injured herself, and that she hadn't realized how serious it was. Anwar, meanwhile, distanced himself from the direct cause of death, but made vague statements blaming Zaman. Their mutual blame and lack of remorse during interviews frustrated investigators. What became clear, however, was that Zaman had enabled the abuse by failing to protect her daughter and even participating in the neglect, while Anwar had orchestrated and carried out the worst physical violence. Zaman admitted to not seeking medical help for the broken limbs. She admitted knowing Sanam was injured and in pain, but feared Anwar's reaction. Police discovered that she had searched online for advice on dealing with broken bones, but had chosen to treat the child at home, likely under coercion or pressure. Police also recovered damning digital evidence, including text messages between Zaman and Anwar, some of which reference punishment or control of Sanam. Search history suggesting an awareness of the injuries Sanam had suffered. Lack of photographs or social activity involving Sanam in the final weeks of her life, indicating her increasing isolation. Neighbors told police they heard crying, sometimes for long periods, and noticed Sanam had stopped being seen outside. One witness noted that Zaman had begun telling people her daughter was sleeping if anyone asked to see her. A particularly heartbreaking piece of evidence was the state of the home. While Anwar and Zaman lived in relative comfort, Sanam's area was stark, unclean, and hidden. Her toys were unused, and she had few clothes. This highlighted how she had been dehumanized in her own home, treated not as a beloved child, but as a burden or nuisance. As the evidence mounted, the Crown Prosecution Service (CPS) charged Subhan Anwar with murder and Zabina Zaman with causing or allowing the death of a child. The CPS emphasized that Zaman's failure to act, even as her daughter suffered horrific abuse, made her criminally responsible under the law. The prosecution prepared a painstakingly detailed case, with medical experts, psychologists, and child protection professionals all contributing. The evidence was overwhelming. Sanam had been beaten, tortured, and ignored to death. At trial, the jury was shown photographs of Sanam's injuries with discretion, forensic diagrams, and heard emotional testimony from social workers and medical staff. Subhan Anwar was charged with the murder of Sanam Navsarka, and the case went to trial, capturing public attention due to the heartbreaking nature of the crime and the age of the victim. During the trial, the prosecution presented compelling evidence of the abuse that Sanam suffered, highlighting the severity and the duration of the harm inflicted. The defense attempted to challenge certain aspects of the case, but the overwhelming evidence led to a conviction. The judge, addressing the court, emphasized the brutality of the crime and the lasting impact it had on the community and the family. The sentence handed down reflected the seriousness of the offense and the need to send a clear message about protecting the most vulnerable. In February 29, the court found Subhan Anwar guilty of murder and sentenced him to a minimum of 23 years in prison. Zabina Zaman was found guilty of allowing the death of her child and was sentenced to 9 years in prison. The judge described the case as one of almost unimaginable cruelty and condemned both defendants for their inhumanity. He acknowledged the pain caused to the wider community and emphasized the need for stronger protections for children at risk. Subhan Anwar, convicted in 2009 for the brutal murder of his partner's 2-year-old daughter, Sanam Navsarka, died in prison on February 14, 2013. He was found dead in his cell at HMP Long Larton, a high-security prison in Worcestershire. Anwar had been serving a minimum 23-year sentence for the torture and murder of Sanam, who suffered 107 injuries during a month-long ordeal. 2 fellow inmates, Gary David Smith, 47, and Lee William Newell, 44, were arrested on suspicion of murder. They later appeared in court charged with Anwar's killing. The incident occurred when Anwar was allegedly held hostage in his cell before being killed. The motive behind the murder was not explicitly stated by the perpetrators. However, the prison has a known moral code among inmates that targets those convicted of offenses against children. This code often leads to verbal and physical abuse, and in some cases, death. Anwar's family expressed shock, stating he had been a model prisoner and had considered Smith and Newell as friends. In the aftermath of her death, efforts were made to honor Sanam's memory and advocate for change. Memorials and vigils were held by the community, and some local organizations established funds or initiatives in her name aimed at supporting vulnerable children and families. These acts of remembrance serve both as a tribute to Sanam and a call to action, ensuring that her tragic death is not forgotten, and that steps are taken to prevent similar losses in the future. The disturbing murder of 2-year-old Sanam Navsarka remains one of the most harrowing child abuse cases in recent British history. It is a stark reminder of the fragility of childhood and the critical importance of vigilance, intervention, and compassion in protecting the youngest members of society. Sanam's story challenges all of us families, communities, professionals, and policymakers to do better, to listen more closely, and to act decisively when children are at risk. While no words can undo the pain of such a loss, the hope is that from tragedy can come greater awareness and stronger protections for children everywhere. The tragic story of Sanam Navsarka is a painful and sobering example of how abuse and neglect can destroy innocent lives. Born on Christmas Eve in 2005, Sanam's brief life was filled with unimaginable suffering at the hands of those who were meant to care for her. Her death was not a momentary accident, but the result of sustained, horrific abuse that went unnoticed, unreported, and unchallenged until it was far too late. Sanam's case forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about child protection, domestic violence, and the systems designed to safeguard the vulnerable. It reveals the gaps in communication, the missed warning signs, and the often hidden nature of cruelty that can exist behind closed doors. It also reminds us of the enormous responsibility that falls on communities, social services, and individuals to listen closely, to intervene early, and to never turn a blind eye. This episode of Human Wreckage is not just about the pain and horror, it's about awareness and prevention. By sharing Sanam's story, we hope to shine a light on the warning signs of abuse and the urgent need for collective vigilance. Every one of us has a role to play, whether as a neighbor, teacher, health professional, or friend. Speaking up, reporting concerns, and supporting families under stress can be the difference between life and death for a child. As we close, let's carry Sanam's memory with us, not as a symbol of despair, but as a call to action. No child should suffer in silence, and no family should be left unsupported. Together, we can work towards a future where children are safe, nurtured, and free from harm. Thank you for listening to Human Wreckage. Stay vigilant, stay compassionate, and never hesitate to act.